and justice. What crimes did Holmes commit? Yes, thank you. Well, we know that in a Scandal in Bohemia, he had a very favorable impression of Irene Adler. But Watson tells us he called her the woman, but he didn't feel the emotion of love for her. All emotions, and that one particularly, are foreign to his cold, precise, but admirably balanced mind. So Holmes may not have worn his emotions on his sleeve, but he did have emotions. I think great empathy and compassion for people, even though it didn't show. Now, about his feeling for the law and for justice, I don't want to compare him to Jesus or to claim that he's a Christian, because I don't think he is. But in the Bible, Jesus, in the New Testament, Jesus talks about the law. He says the law was created for human beings. We weren't created for the law. So when you have a law in Israel that says you cannot work, it's against the law to work on the Sabbath day. It's to give us a rest and a break. But there can be extenuating circumstances where, for example, if you're a shepherd, you take your day off. On the Sabbath, you don't tend the sheep. But if one walks off into the swamp, the poor thing's going to perish. You're going to go rescue it. But there are some legalistic minds that say, you worked on the Sabbath, you know, you broke the law. So I think Holmes had a higher commitment to the spirit of the law. And we'll get to the crimes. If you remember the Boscombe Valley mystery, there were two, the father and son, the McCarthys, and they had this horrible argument. And they parted ways. They're out in the middle of the field, and the son leaves. And then he hears a horrible scream from behind. He runs back. He finds his father has been murdered and is lying in the field. And the police arrest him for the crime. He claims to be innocent. Holmes takes it up and investigates. And he discovers that he finds who the real perpetrator was. This is an elderly man. He listens to his story. He feels great compassion for this man. This man is the elder McCarthy, who was murdered, had made his life a living hell for decades. So this man murdered him, but he's also very elderly, and he's very ill, and the doctors give him a month or two to survive. So Holmes heard his story. He says, listen, you tell us your story. Watson and I will take notes. And then I want you to write confession. This is, we'll have it in writing. I want you to sign it. I won't use it if I don't have to. I think this young innocent man who's in jail now, I think the case against him is going to fall apart. And he'll be freed. If that's the case, I will not present this. Now, there was a law at the time that said if you are aware of a crime, you must tell the police, or else you could be an accessory to the crime. But Holmes kept it to himself. He didn't tell on.
There's still that law that says called misprision of felony. Misprision of felony.
Yes. You're right. And in the Blue Carbuncle, there was a James writer who took, stole a fabulous gem and framed an innocent man to take a rap for him. And Holmes, of course, got the Blue Carbuncle back. It's in Tom's Hotel. In joke. So he got that, and he tracked down James Ryder. He said, I want to talk to you. What's your name? Ryder gives him a false name. He said, no, your real name. And Ryder fesses up. And he discovers that Holmes is onto him. And he starts pleading for mercy. And Holmes said, you didn't show any mercy for this innocent man that you framed. But in the end, he lets James Ryder go. And Watson is confounded. Like, this guy was really the criminal. He took this fabulous gem. He should be in jail. And Holmes said, well, you put him in jail now, this kind of a guy, he's going to be in jail. He's going to be a jailbird for life. So I know I'm compounding a felony, but I'm also trying to save a soul. And besides, I'm not retained by the police to supply their deficiencies, and this is the season of forgiveness, it's Christmas. So for all these reasons, he let them know that that was a crime, accessory to the crime, but Holmes got the jewel back. But of these crimes, when did Holmes start carrying around burglary tools and breaking and entering? And that was only after the Great Hiatus and the return of Sherlock Holmes. So let me put this in context. Doyle had written the first 2 novels of Sherlock Holmes. Historian Howard Haycraft tells us that the success of that second story brought the editor of the Strand magazine camping on Doyle's doorstep with a contract to write a dozen short stories about Holmes. And Doyle went for it, he did it. So in that 1 year, he wrote 12 stories that came out every month. They became so popular, people queued up at the newsstand to get the next issue when it was coming out. This made Sherlock Holmes a household word. And it also created a market for this kind of genre in writing. But Doyle didn't intend to write any more Holmes stories, but he got a lot of pressure from the magazine, circulation going through the roof, you have to write more. So he wrote for another year, and at the end of that year, killed Holmes off in the final problem. And this began what we call the Great Hiatus. 1893, Holmes died. 1903, Doyle brought him back to the dead and wrote more stories. And during this time, there was a proliferation of writers, good writers, who wrote short stories about their characters. Now, one of these, in 1899, the same year that William Gillette wrote his famous play on Sherlock Holmes, E.W. Hornung wrote about A.J. Raffles, listed here. And Raffles, A.J. Raffles and his partner, Bunny Manders, if you read these stories, you feel like you're reading a Sherlock Holmes story. The atmosphere is the same. The only problem is these guys are criminals. He's the amateur craftsman. And a lot of the reading public was uncomfortable with a criminal being the lead character in a story or a series of stories. And Doyle said something to Hornung about it too. So who was E.W. Hornung? He was Doyle's brother-in-law. He married his sister Constance. And he dedicated the first book, as you'll see when it passes around, to ACD, Arthur Conan Doyle, this form of flattery. So Doyle himself wasn't fully comfortable with having a criminal as the lead character. But when did he start carrying burglar's tools and breaking and entering? Several stories, but only after the return. So he must have been influenced by this. So now let's look at the crimes he may have did commit in the adventure of Charles Augustus in Milverton. We begin the story with Holmes and Watson taking the constitutional walk, and they get back to the rooms, and there's a card from Charles Augustus Milverton, and Watson says, "Who is this guy?" "Oh, he's the worst man in London, the king of all the blackmailers. The way I feel about him, if you've ever gone to the zoo and you've seen the reptiles and the snakes, and you get that feeling. That's how I feel when I see Milverton." He had it known on the street that he will pay a large sum for a good servant to come forward and give him letters and things that are indiscreet, and then he will save them. He will pay them a good sum so he gets the best goods on the market, and then he will blackmail people. And of course, there are marriages of convenience and that kind of thing. So, what was I going to say? Doyle has a client, the lady Eva Blackwell, who's being blackmailed by Milverton. She comes to Holmes and commissions him to deal with Milverton. That's why Milverton is invited to go to Holmes's rooms. So he shows up, and Holmes says, you know, you're demanding 7,000 pounds for this, and that's way too high. I'm representing her, and I'm authorized to offer you 2,000 pounds. That's good money. You should take it. And Milverton says, you don't understand. This is a business with me. It's not personal. But if I lower my price for you, word will get out on the street. Others won't be so quick to want to pay me. But if they don't pay me and I make an example out of them, then people will pay what I want. So that's that. So what does Holmes do? He pulls a gun on Milverton. He says, hold him, Watson. And Watson picks up a chair and he's going to hold him against the wall. And Milverton says, you disappoint me, Holmes. I expected more of you. You're committing a crime. He was. Detaining somebody against their will is a crime. So, but Holmes, so Milverton says, besides, I'm armed to the teeth. And he opens his jacket to show. And some scholars think that he did this on purpose. He knew all along. He knew he was armed. He wanted to know where they were. Now he knows. So he puts his gun down. He says, let him go, Watson. So Milverton walks out, confident that Holmes won't shoot him. But now the next stage of Holmes's plan begins. You have the campaign. He wants to get into the building that the mansion where Milverton lives. He wants to get the letters back. Some scholars feel he did this on purpose. He wanted to get not only his client's letters back, but all the letters that he could get from victims. But he needs to know information. What time does Milverton go to bed? Does he have his sleeper? Where is the office situated in the house? And what's the best point of entry? So he needs information. He disguises himself as a plumber's apprentice, and he goes out for several days. Now the deadline's coming up, so he doesn't have a lot of time to work with. But he's there every day for several days. He comes back one day. He says to Watson, "You don't think of me as a marrying man, do you?" Watson says, "Certainly not." "Well, I'm engaged." And good old Watson, "Oh, my dear fellow, congratulations." And Holmes says, "I wanted information." And now Watson is outraged. He has always been a defender of the fair sex. He's like, "You gotta break this poor woman's heart, you know." And Holmes says, "No, you must play your cards the best you can in this kind of a situation. Besides, I rejoice to tell you that I have a hated rival who will cut me out the moment my back is turned." So he's not so worried about this fickle woman. But this is a crime. Breaking an engagement is breach of promise. And wasn't Pickwick falsely accused of breaking his engagement with the woman? And he said, "No, I never proposed to her. We're not together." But they brought him to court. He had to stand before a judge. The judge found him guilty. This is the Me Too movement of the 1800s. And he fined him, but he wouldn't pay the fine, so the judge put him in jail. So his friends show up and they say, "Look, just pay the fine. You'll be released." He said, "No, I'm not paying the fine. I'm innocent. This is a matter of principle." So his friends paid the fine on his behalf and he was released. But Watson, when he sees Milverton, describes him to us as looking like a benevolent Pickwick. So now they plan the campaign. Watson says, "I'm coming." Holmes says, No, you can't. It's too dangerous." And Watson says, "Look, if you don't let me come, I'm going to go right to the police. I'm going to tell them the whole thing." So Watson gets to come. Holmes is like, "Oh, it's all going to go well. I don't need you." And Watson says, "How do you know that? You don't know what's going to happen." But now they have a plan, and Watson cuts out some black silk face covering that he could use as a mask, and they dress like they're going to the theater on the night in question when they have to break in. This is the last night or two before the deadline. So Milverton goes to bed precisely at 10:30. He's said to be a heavy sleeper. Watson and Holmes leave Baker Street at 11 o'clock. They take a cab, but they park it some distance away. And Watson tells us they walked for 2 miles to get to the house. And some Shelakian scholars say, no, the district wasn't quite that big, it wasn't 2 miles, but it was some distance. And they get to the house, it's surrounded by a 6-foot-high wall. But the gate is unlocked, they walk right to the gate. They go through the laurel bushes, they go up to the greenhouse, which is attached to the house, and Holmes has figured out that this is the best point of entry. He pulls out his burglar's tools and takes a glass cutter and cuts a hole in the glass, sticks his arm through and opens the door from inside. So what is breaking? What is entering? Breaking, of course, is what you think it is, breaking the point of entry, whether it's a lock or a window. Entering, if you so much as put a finger into that space behind the broken area, that's considered entering. You could get 20 years for that. So Holmes breaks in, opens the door, they get into the greenhouse, it's attached to the house, they go through a corridor, they get into Milverton's office. So there's the bedroom door. Milverton should be asleep, sound asleep over there. There are 2 other doors, the one they came in from, and another one that entered the house. And Holmes stations Watson in front of the door, one of the doors. So if you listen for anybody, if they come this way, we'll go out that way. If they come that way, we'll go the way we came out to the greenhouse. So that was the plan. And then Holmes spent half an hour breaking the safe open. He gets the safe open, and there's a pile of bundled letters, indiscreet letters that he's holding. The best possible time to get the most money out of it. And then something unexpected happens. They hear Milverton, who's not in bed. He's down in the house, and now he's coming back to the office. Holmes closes the safe door. Holmes and Watson dart behind the floor-to-ceiling draperies. And Milverton enters, and then he sits at the desk, and they can't talk to each other, Holmes and Watson, but they're thinking, like, what's this guy doing up at this hour? So they're there for quite a bit of time. Milverton is sitting at the desk. Watson gets enough nerve to part the draperies a little bit. He feels Holmes pressing on him. They're both looking at what's going on. Milverton is sitting with his back to them. They can see the bald spot on the back of his head. And if he wanted to, Watson could reach out and touch him. But he doesn't want to. But then Watson gets a little jab of a bit of a panic because he looks right past Milverton over on the other side. Holmes had improperly closed the safe door, so it's slightly awry, slightly ajar. And he's thinking, like, all Milverton has to do is look up, and there it is. I know something's amiss. But Milverton is so focused on the paperwork that he's looking at. And then after a time, a woman comes in, she has a veil. And Milverton says to her, "Madam, why did you make the appointment for this hour? I mean, I'm available all day. You could have made it a point to come anytime." And she lifts her veil, and he says, "It's you." The previous victim. He says, "Why have you come?" And she said, "My husband was the best, kindest, gentlest man in the whole world. And you knew I couldn't pay your demands. And you sent the letter to him, and he read them, and he died." He doesn't tell us how he died, whether, suicide or heart palpitations or whatever happened, but she's holding Milverton accountable. He says, "This is business with me, madam. I mean, you could have turned your diamonds into paste, or you could have come up with the money." She said, "No, I couldn't." He said, "Well, why are you doing this? What do you expect from me?" She said, "You're not going to have any more victims." She shoots him 5 times. He staggers to his feet, staggers toward her. He says, "You've done me." She shoots him one more time. Down he goes into the chair, slumped over the desk, profusely bleeding. She leaves. The shots roused the household. So now they're clamoring. Holmes quickly jumps out from behind the door, locks the door, as Watson stay there, and he opens the door to the safe, and he's taking all the letters, everybody, pro bono work, get everything done. He takes the time. Meanwhile, they're outside, they're trying to get the door open. Watson and Holmes leave just in time. You know, they just break in, they're just going out. These guys follow them down the corridor to the greenhouse, out onto the yard, and there were other household members out on the yard looking for them. So here, everybody's chasing Holmes and Watson. Holmes and Watson come to this 6-foot wall. Holmes is quite agile. He goes right over. Watson is a little slower. He pulls himself up and somebody grabs his ankle. Watson kicks him away. That's assault and battery. That's another crime. And they were committing trespass. Another crime. But Watson manages to kick himself away. They go over the wall, they leave. But the household is now seen, they haven't seen the faces, it's covered. But they now have a reasonably good description to give to the police of the two murderers, because they didn't see the woman, they think these two guys did the murder. And the next day, Inspector Lestrade of Scotland Yard comes to visit Holmes, and he says, "We had a murder last night, and you need to help solve the crime." And Holmes says, "I know about that guy. He's despicable, you know." He didn't say it in these words, but he deserved what he got. It's the attitude. He said, "You know, I'm not going to help you with that. He's a criminal." And Lestrade says, "Yeah, we know he's a criminal. We were investigating him. We were trying to get people to come forward, but we couldn't get any evidence. But now he's murdered. I need your help." And Holmes says, "You're on your own, basically." So he says, Lestrade hands him the description. He says, "Well, can you help us give us a lead on the description of the perpetrator, the murderers?" And Holmes looks at it and he says, "Oh, come along, Lestrade. This could be a description of Watson." And poor Watson is standing right there. I suspect that he's having trouble breathing for the next few minutes. But Lestrade finally gets the point and goes on his way. Now that's almost the end of the story, except we only have a little coda. Holmes and Watson had seen the face of the woman when she lifted her veil, but they couldn't quite put together who she was. It's, to me, this is like we're watching a movie and we say, "Oh, who's that actor? What was she in?" And you know, it takes a while to get it. I think that's something akin to what Holmes was experiencing. But he finally got it. He brooded all morning, and then he says to Watson, "Come with me." They walk into town, and there's a store window that has cutouts of the newspaper clippings and photographs of royalty, celebrities, debutantes who had come out in the last 6 months. And in the midst of all this, Holmes points to her face and Watson sees it. Now they know who she is. But Watson never tells us. As the story begins, in the opening line, he says, "I'm going to describe the story." Even though it's, you know, this happened a long time ago, but I want to cover, you know, I don't want the family to suffer any repercussions. So, anyways, one of my favorite stories in the canon. It's been dramatized a number of times on radio and on TV. I'm trying to get a list of these and links that I'm going to give to Jim, and he will. I'm going to try it within a couple of days. I have partially done, but not finished. But we don't have a lot of time. I know we're running out of time, but I just want to tell you the first one at least. In the 1950s, John Gielgud and Ralph Richardson did Holmes and Watson in a series of half-hour radio dramatizations, full cast. And the first one was based on Milverton. They called it the Blackmail, and they wanted to introduce people maybe who have not read the stories to Holmes and Watson. So in the beginning, they took the first half from A Study in Scarlet when Watson meets Holmes. So Watson tells us he was a medical doctor. He was sent to Afghanistan during the war. He comes back from Afghanistan. Well, he was shot in the war. And he said, "I was invalided back to England, where I naturally gravitated to London." So in London, he was living on a pension. and he's been living high on the hog, and he's starting to need money. So he needs a roommate to help defray his costs. He happens to go to the Criterion Bar, runs into an old friend in Stanford, and they catch up. And Watson says, "I'm looking for a fellow lodger." And Stanford says, "You're the second name today to tell me that." And Watson says, "Oh, who was the first?" "A fellow named Holmes." Watson says, and on the radio show, this is not in the book, but Watson says, "What was his other name?" And Stanford pauses and he says, "Shermanford, was it?" No, Sherlock, you knew something weird. Well, this is an Easter egg for us. It turns out that in the original manuscript, Doyle listed the characters as Shermanford Holmes and Ormond Soccer.
Right.
And later he scratched it out and made it Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John H. Watson. So the scriptwriter knew what he was doing, and I love that. And in the second half, in 15 minutes, they do Charles Augustus and Milverton, and they do it justice. It was a lot of fun. I'm going to put that link up. There were other people who played Holmes and Watson and did this show. In the 1960s, Carlton Hobbs and Norman Shelley did a series of half-hour shows. Well, great amount, but not the whole pan, but they did a lot. And they did Milverton, and these are more very faithful to the way the stories are told in the books. And then I just want to mention a couple more. Robert Hardy and Nigel Scott did a series, just 8 radio shows. They didn't put them on radio, they released them on long-term albums, long play, LP, half an hour each, and Milverton is one of the ones they did. So Robert Hardy played Milverton. He played Holmes in this. He later played Milverton for the German press series. And then, of course, Clive Merrison and Michael Williams, who was Judy Dench's husband, played Holmes and Watson for the entire pack. And these are greatly to be pursued if you like these. And then on TV, Douglas Wilmer and Nigel Scott did this. And then, of course, Brett. So that's it. I don't know if there's any time. Yeah.
When Sherlock Holmes took them after the story all ended and down to see the portrait, what woman did they see?
We're not told.
I know. You know who it is?
I don't know.
Oh,
Do you know?
okay.
No, I haven't figured it out.
Later story, we find out it was Miller, I think.
Oh,
Who did the shooting?
I missed that. I'll have to add that as an addendum.
Oh, we don't. So we eat out in the cafeteria.
Yes,
Okay.
here's what we, Drew,
Yeah.
you are spectacular. During the meeting, someone looks over at me and goes, "He's got all this in his head."
I have to mention that there's one further.
Can I interrupt you, Dave? Because I want to recognize.
I'll just mention the most recent version of Milverton was part of the Cumberbatch Sherlock series. And at the end of that, Sherlock shoots himself, commits murder.
No, I haven't watched that whole series. I know, but it's not gonna be anything remedial watching.
And oh, go ahead. Others?
Did you have anything about work?
Right there.
We do. I'll toast you right now. Drew, you're a treasure. We're so glad you came down from New Jersey.
Thank you.
I know you came to be with me, and I appreciate that. But we're all right. Thank you. Thank you. We have a couple of toasts. We've got actually got one toast that's not here, but if we could, we had a member pass away in the last 2 weeks. And we had a member pass away in the last couple of weeks, and his name is Ron Lyon. Lees. I never pronounced his name.
Yeah.
Jim, you want to remember Ron?
Yeah, Ron and I were going to John Shaw's house in the 80s, early 90s, but we never met there. Ron came down from Denver. He was a member of
Dr. Watson's neglected patients. And we discovered each other on Welcome Homes. You both telling our stories about Shaw. And so when I had overnights with Southwest Airlines in Denver, I would call up Ron and his wife Mary, and they just have been married 53 years. So he died last week. He's had ill health for many years, but in October he fell in the house again. He fell before and was out for 2 or 3 days, and then nobody found him because she was gone. But he was in hospice from October, and he died on Martin Luther King Day. And so I'd like to remember Ron Lease, my brother, and Shaw.
Yeah.
It's here, Brandon.
It's January is always the sad time if we do have to remember folks, if we stand up on terrace. So thank you for that. Normally, we would have glasses and we would be clinking and we'd be doing all those things. These are gonna be dry toast. I knew you'd like that. If we could, let's see. We have a toast. Mr. Vikstrom is going to share a special toast.
A toast to the women. Let's lift Irene's disguise. Truly, who is under that dainty bonnet? In the canon, I find a Victorian woman whom men describe as possessing the face of the most beautiful woman, and a lovely woman with a face that men might die for, and a beautiful creature. According to the gentleman, her physical beauty is singular. Fortunately, Conan Doyle also reveals through her actions a woman with traits I could admire and encourage my daughters and female students to emulate. Be independent, be courageous, be clever, be Irene.
Here he is. The woman, absolutely, to the woman. We've got Kathy has a toast for us as well.
Okay, to another woman. Getting her right place out here. Here's to Mrs. Hudson, the ever loyal and faithful landlady of Holmes and Watson at 221B Baker Street. She often went above and beyond her duties as a landlady, doing such things as preparing meals, escorting visitors, and delivering telegrams. So much so that some people thought of her as the maid. Holmes thought her an excellent cook. She even helped Holmes with a caper or two. We don't know much about her. Mrs. Hudson was sometimes referred to as Martha Louise Hudson, though that name was never stated in canon. Always referred to as Mrs., but there was no mention of a husband, past or present. Holmes and Mrs. Hudson had a great deal of mutual respect and affection for each other. And here's a quote in which Watson described the relationship between Holmes and Mrs. Hudson in the opening of The Adventure of the Dying Detective. Mrs. Hudson, the landlady of Sherlock Holmes, was a long-suffering woman. Not only was her first floor flat invaded at all hours by throngs of singular and often undesirable characters, but her remarkable lodger showed an eccentricity and irregularity in his life, which must have sorely tried her patience. His incredible untidiness, his addiction to music at strange hours, his occasional revolver practice within doors, his weird and often malodorous scientific experiments, and the atmosphere of violence and danger which hung around him made him the very worst person in London. On the other hand, his payments were princely. The landlady stood in the deepest awe of him and never dared to interfere with him, however outrageous his proceedings might seem. She was fond of him too, for he had made a remarkable gentleness and courtesy in the dealings with women. Here's to Mrs. Hudson.
And Reese, before you sit down, as you walk in, we've had to change the whole meeting around.
Yeah.
But if you would share Toast to Professor Moriarty.
He is the Napoleon of crime, Watson. He is the organizer of half that is evil and nearly all that is undetected in this great city. He is a genius, a philosopher, an abstract thinker. He has a brain of the first order. Thus, one of the great mysteries of our Sherlockian times began. Professor James Moriarty appears only twice among Watson's writings, but his impact was profound. Aside from Holmes and Watson and possibly Lestrade, no other person in the canon impacted our Sherlockian world more than this dark and deadly man. Holmes said of him, he sits motionless like a spider in the center of its web, but that web has 1,000 radiations, and he knows well every quiver of each of them. He does little himself. Holmes understood and possibly even feared this man, for he intuitively recognized the fact that Moriarty's minions filled the criminal world under his direct guidance with this evil intent. It is not pleasure I reflect upon his memory. Truth be known, he only deserves our disgust and pity, as his watery grave at the foot of the falls was appropriate and well deserved. Yet I am compelled to lift my glass, and I encourage you to do the same. I offer a toast to Professor Moriarty, along with his enduring role in the canon.
And good riddance. Dry toast. And what we're going to be doing is, if you'd like to eat, we're going to adjourn to the outside. Right. Oh, and so what's going to happen is Gail is going to close us, and Dave has some books for you back there. So please visit with Dave, and if you're going to be eating, you can go out front and order. And Bill, I forgot something.
I just want to mention about next month's story.
Yes.
The reason the illustrious client follows Milverton is because we have a candidate who also may be worse than him. So and you read the illustrious client, think about that. Think about the plot that you might have heard it before. And so that's there's reason in the ordering of stories.
Well, it works. Okay. Gail, if you will share.
And this is a toast to Holmes and Watson by way of this poem, right?
That's right. 221B Baker Street. And it goes back to 1928 when Vincent Sarah wrote it. Here dwell together still two men of note who have lived and so and never died. How very near they seem, yet how remote. That age before the world went all right. But still gained foot for those with ears, attuned to catch the distant view. Hallelujah. By the way, that was in this story. The view hallelujah. England is England yet. Yet for all our fears, only those things the heart believes are true. A yellow fog swirls past the window pane. At night descends upon this sable street of lonely, handsome flashes through the rain. The ghostly lamps fail at 20 feet. Here the world explodes. These two survive, and it's always 1895.